A year ago, the government first made clear its plans to deal with the growing financial problems of the National Health Service. In a major shake-up, the aim is to provide more health care for less money by injecting some competition, for instance, allowing hospitals like this to go independent. In one health district, 1989 started in an atmosphere of even greater turmoil. Shropshire had one of the longest waiting lists in the country, yet the managers wanted to close hospitals to help reduce their projected £2 million overspend. As the financial difficulties of the health service appear to deepen, is there anything an outsider from industry can do to help? Sir John Harvey Jones is one of Britain's best-known and most respected businessmen. He's agreed to visit Shropshire to see if he can use his experience to help sort out their difficulties and rethink their healthcare for the future.
I'm very flattered that Shropshire have invited me. They are a county that quite plainly have massive problems. There can't be a single person in this country who isn't worried about the health service, and there are very few people who are not at some time or other worried about their own health. We're none of us really quite sure whether the problems are that they haven't got enough money or that they don't run it right. Plainly, you could spend a lot more money, and it may be important to do so. And really, I don't quite know what the answer is.
One man is in charge of spending £80 million a year on Shropshire's health. That's a far bigger turnover than the average company. Ken Morris gave up the chance of being a footballer for a career in local government. Now, as general manager of the local health district, he's struggling to set a budget and a strategy for the coming year.
I think Sir John could help us in a number of ways. At worst, he could say we've got it all wrong. And quite honestly, I would find that helpful if somebody were from the outside to look and say, you've really made a mess of it. Alternatively, he can say, you've got 90% of it right, and there are just bits and pieces at the edges you need to tidy up. I can't wait, really, to hear what he has to say, and I'd be intrigued to see how he views the problems of Shropshire.
Ken Morris was appointed by and works very closely with the district chairman, Frank Jones.
Right, here we are now. Yeah. And now we can see the water garden that we were talking about. Yeah. Nice.
Frank Jones is a typical health chairman, a local businessman, self-made millionaire, and also chairman of Telford Development Corporation. Telford is a fast-growing new town in the middle of a huge rural county. There's a brand new hospital opening here, and that's part of Shropshire's problem. To help pay for it and make the cuts that are needed, Ken Morris wants to close smaller cottage hospitals spread around the county. But that's not a popular strategy. Since 1987, Ken Morris has been struggling to close 10 small hospitals. So far, he has closed just 6, which still isn't enough to make ends meet. Now he's trying to close the other 4.
This hospital, yes, is very much under threat. We've been reprieved 3 times and we're still waiting for the outcome of the area health meeting this month.
Could I just ask, what's it actually expected to happen to the waiting lists when Telford comes on stream at that workload?
The waiting lists that exist, a number...
Any proposals that Ken Morris makes have to be passed by the District Health Authority. It's an appointed body, half of them councillors, that represents the local population and can be very political. In the past, Ken Morris has often failed to convince his authority he's right.
Because I think it should concern this august body that the people who are democratically elected in this county, to a man and to a woman, and regardless of political persuasion, unanimously are condemning the path that we're treading.
I mean, the morale of the staff is so low, it's unbelievable. They just keep moving the goalposts, and no one knows what's happening from one day to the next.
I think if the authority made a stand and said this is what's going to happen and do it, then we'd have to accept it.
Now Ken Morris and his managers are looking forward to Sir John's visit as they prepare for a crucial authority meeting that will decide Shropshire's future in just 3 weeks' time.
If this were a management board, you know how to run the business. But the fact is that you are being stopped from running the business efficiently by outside factors.
I don't think in the circumstances that we're in, with all the sort of public scrutiny that's going on for the health service generally, that it does any harm at all to have any outside influence which can be seen to be beneficial, I would think. Apart from which, he didn't mind going for a pint. I gather he calls a spade a spade.
I've been sent an absolute mass of paper by Shropshire to look at, and I have to confess to a sinking heart as I work through it. And when I think of the people who are responsible for overseeing the management of Shropshire, they must be absolutely bombed and boonswoggled by this.
How do you do at last?
Nice to meet you.
Well, thanks for putting up with me. I'm very interested in the problems that you've got. I don't know much about the National Health Service. I've read the piles of stuff.
Right.
But I'd like
Well, the first thing I want to find out from Ken is what his feelings and attitude are about these waiting lists, which worry the hell out of me.
The waiting list could be brought down.
I accept that.
I'm not trying to corner you. I'm merely trying to understand.
Okay. What I'm saying is, first and foremost, you have to take a view on how important those waiting lists are. A lot of doctors would say, clinically, they are not important, right? There are a number of conditions which are not urgent.
Well, I'm pretty sure that the 8,000 people who are on the waiting list don't take the happy view that others perhaps are taking about whether they need that.
That's right.
And somebody presumably has told them they do need an operation, or they should have an operation, or they should have some sort of treatment.
Yes. A lot depends on the role of the GP in this.
Ken seems to me to have got the worst of both worlds. He's surprisingly relaxed about the waiting list, which is getting longer. And at the same time, he's going to overspend on his budget.
What are those, Ken?
The problem we have this coming year is a potential overspending of about £2 million on our 80 million budget. And that is likely to continue if we don't correct it through for the next 10 years, in effect.
What, so you'll have spent 20 million over your budget?
Well, that's right. If it were
well, how can you do that
if
you don't get the damn money?
Right. Well, we can't. And so we have to take steps to bring the budget under control in the short term.
And I still don't quite understand what happens if you do just go on overspending by 2 million.
We won't be allowed to, very simply because...
So what does that mean?
The regional health authority and the Secretary of State...
No, but what happens? I mean, do they fire you, or do they shut the whole thing down, or is it taken over by Mrs. Thatcher, or what?
Technically, all of those things are possible.
I'm a bit like the Red Indians out of that meeting at the moment. I'm still riding round and round the wagon train, and I'm not too sure where the wagons are. It's particularly the doctors and nurses in the smaller hospitals who really feel the pain from the continuous changes of plan and the oscillations and vacillations between Ken and his political masters. The Health Authority are going to vote in just 2 weeks' time on Ken's latest plan, which involves shutting this hospital, amongst others.
Sister, can I introduce Sir John? This is Sister Reynolds.
I want to meet the staff and the patients here, and in particular, Alan Gaynor, who's the local GP and also on Ken's management committee.
Been into the hospital on many occasions as an acute problem. Oh dear, how long have you been in this time?
Oh, last Monday night.
Oh, not too bad.
No.
Yes, well, what would you do if the hospital wasn't?
I'm going to keep this open.
Are you very worried about the financial situation in Shropshire?
Well, yes, we're worried if it's going to mean the closure of the hospital here, and because we see that we provide a service not just for the local people, but for almost the whole of South Shropshire.
But there's a lot of talk about trying to solve the financial problems by some sort of mixed economy solution. Do you think that's possible?
In this hospital itself?
Yes.
Well, we are actually at the moment thinking and looking at this possibility. We have 6 wards upstairs, which we're thinking if we can convert to private wards, upgrade them, put a lift in, which I believe the Friends are willing to pay for, and anything that will assist us to provide care for everybody. I don't really mind where the money comes from. If we can carry on providing care for people like Mrs. Nichols and other patients in the ward.
Well, it's beyond argument that there's the need, is there?
That's right.
Hello.
Hello, Grandma. This is Mrs. Payne. She's 101. Yeah.
How do you do, Mrs. Payne? I'm glad to see you. You're very colourful. Oh, that's lovely.
Thank you,
I don't get the chance of kissing pretty girls very often.
She's one for the boys.
Is there any chance that one could let beds for looking after the elderly? Because presumably, if you're not taking them, they have to go somewhere.
If there is a need, and we know there is, but we're doing the investigation from our GPs and district nurses and saying, what have you got out there that is at home that would give the relatives a break, and we could have them in for a fortnight every so many 8-10 weeks. We thought perhaps they wouldn't object to paying a fee for having Grandma and Grandad in here for a fortnight.
I would guess so, because if it's Granny and Grandad that the youngsters are bringing in, they want to go away on holidays.
I mean, it's all in draft form at the moment because 3 of us are working on the idea to present it.
Are you going to run your own business?
We'd like
Are you going to do a management buyout?
We'd like to.
Well, I think that's absolutely super to find a couple of entrepreneurs here who actually believe they could do something with this. And it seems to me if that could be done, that would help the sort of aims that the district is after a great deal. Because ultimately you could move more and more off the basic budget. You could also hopefully help the acute cases in other ways. I think that's great. But good luck anyway. Having seen the cottage hospitals, I'm really very impressed at their openness of mind and willingness to think of almost any solution in the private or the public sector which would enable them to survive. Before I end the day, I must, however, see Telford, which, as well as being the new hospital, is also one of the causes of Shropshire's financial problems. Shropshire's other big problem is the waiting list. And that makes it even more difficult for Ken to get any sort of support for the measures that he's trying to put forward. I'm off now to Shrewsbury to see the district hospital, which is the one that's carrying out most of the operations, at least until Telford gets online, to see why they can't cope.
A lot of patients are quite short stay, and one problem is that we're constantly moving our better patients out to make room for those that are more acutely ill. And sometimes patients can actually be moved 4 or 5 times.
My first impression here is that the hospital is hopelessly overloaded and close to breaking down under the strain. I hope that Bob Wilson, the manager, who's also a doctor, can help me understand how we got into this mess.
We've actually had a man on a gynae ward. We've been so hard up for beds, haven't we? We've had to put a man on the sidewall. I mean, it gets very chaotic. It gets uncontrollable because we can't refuse emergency admissions.
This is the problem with having a catchment area this size, is that...
But the catchment area problem is going to get worse, isn't it? I mean, the worry I have is that Telford's only got a relatively small number of beds. You know, one of the worries one has about the strategy, as explained to me at the moment, is you've got this enormous waiting list in Shropshire.
We have.
And nobody's been able to explain to me at the moment how any of the things that are being done is actually going to reduce the waiting list. I mean, I can't see that bringing Telford online is going to...
Well, I think you may be right. I think the point is there will be more surgical beds. The waiting list should reduce to some extent when Telford opens. I don't believe Telford's going to be the entire answer to 8,500 patients.
It couldn't be.
No.
I mean, you know, they'd have to be through like sort of Charlie Chaplin in modern times, wouldn't
That's right. I mean, I can tell you in 1 month we turned away 135 surgical admissions. On the day of admission, we had to phone up and say, don't come in, please.
But I mean, that must drive people absolutely mad.
Yes.
I have an arthritic hip, and I've been waiting for, well, it's over 2 years now that I've had this, and it's getting worse, and I really think that this is just not on.
If you look at this hospital must be an absolute nightmare to run. I don't know how you run it so economically when it's laid out the way it is.
Well, it's like running 2 small hospitals, of course. Our heating goes across the road, you know. I mean, when it snows...
Well, that must be very kind. I mean, yeah. I'm sure the local authorities must be absolutely delighted for you heating their road for them.
But you can imagine the sort of wastage you get, you know, in things like...
Sadly, waiting lists aren't the only problem that Bob and this hospital are trying to cope with. Half of it's across the road in old Canadian wartime huts and in a really bad condition.
So then we're...
Oh, gosh, this is not quite up to hospital standard, is it?
No. This is a standard on many of the wards on this side of the road.
And that great hole in there.
Yes, and you can see where...
One can see where the roof's...
It would just be nice to have a little bit more money for replacing equipment. And I've got a cryo downstairs, which the gynecologists use, which is getting very dilapidated and it's going to pack up any day. But we're talking of £5,000, £8,000 for that.
But you're absolutely hornswoggled by your own systems, aren't you?
That's right.
I mean, I'd be tempted in your shoes to put my boots through it.
But then...
I think this whole thing is obviously short of funds. But that, sadly, is a situation which requires the very best and clearest management. Where are we off to now?
We're off to theatre next, which is this way.
That way?
Yes.
The hospital itself is just mind-boggling. I mean, I can imagine that people would die before they found the ward that they were trying to go to in this place. It's spread out. It's not logical. It's not clear what goes where or why. Parts of it are really, I mean, they're called the Nightingale Ward, and I have little doubt they were designed by Florence. In fact, I thought I saw her once today. One of the things that worries me is the involvement, or the non-involvement, it seems to me, of the consultants and the doctors in the strategy that's being followed. I mean, do you feel that you, A, understand the strategy, and B, that you own it?
There's a tiered structure, which means that any individual is a long way from the decision.
This is the problem at the present time. We hear about things about 10th hand, and one would hope that possibly with the change coming in the white paper that we might be more involved with the management.
I've read the white paper, and the only 2 bits that seem to me to give one some hope are, first of all, at least some command over the capital that you've got. I mean, the ridiculous thing is that just the shortest visit to Shropshire, you've got enormous potential capital realisation that you can make just from the land that you work.
The white paper may change some of those attitudes, but I think another of the management's problems is that they are hamstrung by so many extraneous influences exerting pressure on them and making decisions.
If you want to try to carry out a strategy where you are deliberately trying to reduce things, you've got to actually have that strategy understood and supported by all the people concerned. And the people concerned are the doctors, the patients, the management, and the other services concerned. And at the moment, I don't think the strategy is clear. To the degree that there is a strategy, I can't see any evidence it's supported by the doctors. And certainly, the strategy is one which is almost calculated to ensure the general public will go into revolt.
I don't know where the money's gone out of it, as we all pay to it, and it's just one big shambles, I think. It's getting worse, isn't it?
I'm really worried for the people of Shropshire. Obviously, the system needs more money, but I have no doubt whatsoever that better and more pointed management would have a real effect on things like the waiting lists. But it'll only happen if everybody in the health business is on board and pulling together for the same objective in the same way. There are plainly a whole host of management problems here, but they're overlaid really by the political ones. And the reality of life is that in most management situations you have to manage some political situations, and you can do things to try and help to manage them. But here they just seem to have run out of both the will and the inventiveness of ways of managing their political environment. It's the chairman of the District Health Authority, Frank Jones, who carries the responsibility for this whole thing. And I want to meet him and Ken to give them my impressions before they present their latest plans to the vital Health Authority meeting, which is now only a week away. But, I mean, you know, I've talked to the guys who are on these committees, and half the time they don't even understand what they're bloody well talking about, because the simple issues are made...
Well, they're made very complicated.
Made very complicated.
But then they're in the business of making everything complicated, aren't they? That's the whole problem. When Ken Morris became the general manager, I had hoped that we would cut down the number of meetings and the amount of paper, and I think we did initially.
I think it's
but
gone
they're now more
way.
and more. I mean, we produce paper and service because money is a problem, and the culture is a problem.
I see.
And that's why we had it. The people that have come into the service from outside have had the most incredible difficulties in coping with the culture. And some of them have come in...
I can understand. I mean, in sheer management terms, you have a problem which is, I think, an inevitable one, set up the way you are, that the strategies you want to follow really have to face the test of political acceptability.
Yeah.
And therefore, my first aim will be to find ways of getting more people involved in the sharing of the totality of the problem.
Yes, I think what I would say is that we have shared it, and what you've come in at a particular point in time where...
I think you've tried to share it,
okay,
Ken, but it takes two to tango.
Well, it does.
And if they don't pick it, if they don't pick it up, you haven't shared it.
That's right. No, I accept that.
I bust a gut to try and get the presentation of the financial stuff simplified. Because you give too much, Ken. I mean, you know, with the best will in the world, there's a mass of detail and very little simplified stuff.
No, that's right, I agree, and we have done that. And it's the general public in Shropshire, because what we have done, I mean, I would actually take issue quite severely with you.
Feel free.
With the way in which, the amount of time and the way in which we have educated people. In fact, I would go so far as to say, in some cases, we've over-educated them.
Well, I'll take issue with you.
Yeah.
It's not the amount of time that you've spent trying to educate them, it's the end result as to what you achieved, Ken. I mean, you know, unfortunately, in the harsh world of business and management, you get no marks for effort. You only get marks for result.
I mean, we shall have a meeting next week. The Health Authority will meet. Now, we've all discussed the problems till we're blue in the face, and really all they need to do is to say, have you got the courage to vote for it or haven't you? Yes or no. But I shall have to listen to a 2-hour breast-beating session asking for more information because they don't believe these figures, and as if something could be changed by talk.
I am not clear, and it seems that the trustees designate are not clear. I don't remember this authority making promises, so then promises, if they were made, must have been made either at another place by other people than the authority, in inverted commas. Now, could you clear that up for me, please?
In this particular case, the best evidence available to us doesn't quite fit the Telford mould.
What that means is, you've used some factors which do not apply. You've come to a conclusion that is probably wrong, and you don't know how much.
That may be the case.
I thought it might.
Ken's plans have to be agreed by the authority, and they're composed very largely of local representatives who are very sensitive about public feeling, in fact, the feeling of Ken's customers. And it is managing this relationship with his customers where the thing seems to me to have gone wrong in Shropshire.
You want to vote?
At the authority meeting, Ken's voluminously documented scheme to shut 4 more hospitals wasn't even voted on. Instead of which, one of the members put up a simple plan on 1 sheet of paper, the aim of which was to shut just 1 hospital, seeking savings all over the shop, including taking out the begging bowl for charity.
And the final one on direct giving, it is commonly accepted, and no one ever refutes, that there is a maximum amount that you can ever get from any appeal. Everyone who's involved in collecting for charities will tell you.
We've got direct giving, you know, Chairman.
Beg pardon?
We've got direct giving in the National Health Service. It's called taxes, and it's called national
That's not
insurance.
giving, is it?
No, we're all doing
That's
it.
politicians putting their hand in your pocket.
The problem is that Kenneth Clark and his company in Whitehall are all sitting on it and hatching it like eggs. Now, where he's going to, I don't know, but we could do with a bit. I'm very doubtful whether this plan, which is now known as the Dunham package, stands much chance of working because it's been produced without the involvement of the people who have to actually deliver it. What I need now is to go up a level to meet the chairman of the Regional Health Authority, Sir James Ackers, to find out what happens if this whole situation in Shropshire goes on and whether there is any more money from the region and what he's going to do about it. The whole thing seems less together, less clear-cut, and there seems a greater tendency to blame somebody else in Shropshire than anywhere else I've been. So I have an unhealthy cynicism that they are at least producing a balanced budget, that I will personally open a small bottle of Babysham if they achieve it.
Yes, I think we have to recognise.
I imagine you'll open a big bottle of Babysham.
We'll open 3 simultaneously.
A sort of 3 Babysham solution.
3 Babysham solution would be a good idea. We have had a number of occasions where there has been a legitimate case for an overdraft to be repaid back in 2 years.
I think you've been lovable and cuddly.
Well, I don't think the people of Shropshire think that we've been lovable and cuddly. I mean, on the contrary, I think what they think we are is a bunch of skinflints who provide Shropshire with less than their due.
I think I do have to ask you now, really the $64 question.
Yes.
Do you think the existing setup can deliver?
Well, I think that I'm not going to give you any specific answer in terms of saying what will happen in the next 3 months, because I would be out of court in doing that. I think the management of Shropshire are going to have to be a good deal more able to make people understand what they're trying to do than they've been in the past. But I'm not in a position of saying, no, this thing will never be brought to fruition under the existing authority management. I don't think that'd be right, Senator.
Well, I mean, you know that it's got to be brought to fruition.
It's got to be brought, that's right.
And so, I mean, again, something has to give. What I am absolutely certain of is that unless there's a different approach employed, the existing authority and management aren't going to deliver. There's just one other area which I'd like the benefit of your advice on, and that is whether you think that the sort of ideas contained in the white paper, and I'm not making any value judgment on them, or certainly not any political judgment on them, but whether those actually offer a way out for Shropshire. I got my own views on the answer to that question.
What the white paper is really saying is that there has to be a contract between the deliverer of the service and the budget holder.
And you might be somewhat cynical about Shropshire's ability to live to contract.
And I would say even the best districts are going to be stretched by this, and the best managers. I think Shropshire have struggled to do relatively simple things, will find this one a burden to achieve satisfactorily.
Although Jim Ackers was extremely careful to avoid committing himself, I'm convinced that the region have no intention of bailing out Shropshire. And this makes it even more important that they resolve their own problems. They will only be able to do that if they have a much more unified team with much wider public support. I'm quite convinced now that Ken is between the upper and lower grindstones, and I've got to really push him at this next meeting with him and Frank to try and persuade him of the urgency of the situation, because unless he makes radical changes, the people of Shropshire are not going to get the health they deserve.
We've been faced with a very obstinate health authority, so much so that Jim Ackers and I, 18 months ago, wanted to change some of the members. And I said to him, okay, let's change them. And he said, well, in effect, I'm going to pick some people. And he picked them, and he said to me, I sent them up to Shropshire, and within 3 months they've gone native. So they were just as bad, voting against everything. And you may not agree, but to some very great, and I know Ken doesn't agree really, and I'm not really a Democrat, I'd say get rid of the health authority, because if you got rid of the health authority, and maybe the chairman as well, you could take the decisions. It's having to satisfy the Community Health Council, the health authority, and every Tom, Dick and Harry. And the niggers in the woodpile, if I may use that, and I'm sure I mustn't these days, but are our own staff. The problem with this business is it's led by the people who work in it.
But come off it, look, you're a very distinguished professional manager. You have never, ever operated with a total freedom. You know damn well that the job of a manager is to manage with what he's got to achieve the best objectives for his customers within the constraints he finds himself in. Of course, to work on the constraints. Now, I mean, you actually are making the first point I made, which is that you've lost the initiative here. You actually have. Yes. You're all of you blaming everybody else, and you're blaming yourselves, and everybody's blaming everybody. Now, you are where you are. Right. And you're at the present moment in a situation where you are further losing credibility because for the sake of £2 million, you're not going to balance those books, I don't think.
In any normal business, that would be considered a margin of toleration and error that could be put right next year.
Let me roll back to you. Do you believe you're going to get more money?
No.
Well, in that case, I mean, the problem that the two of you have to deal with is quite clearly how to achieve what you believe is the best situation in the money you've got. Because every single chap knows, and every single person.
But if I say to Ken, or before him, those who went not 10% of everybody's budget, oh, of course we can't do that. If the hospital come to a full stop, no medical student is taught anything about money at all. Money is irrelevant. I'm dealing with human lives, for Christ's sake. Don't talk to me about money.
But they're not involved. Now, whether one likes it... Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Doctors will always say that they want to be involved until it comes to it.
I know... Well, I know a number of areas in the National Health Service where they are involved. And the ones that seem to me to do best are the ones where the doctors have accepted this responsibility. Now, you may feel that your lot are merely making noises. I don't feel they are.
No, we have very good relations with...
I think the other thing I would say is the key area in this is to find somewhere preserving the cottage hospitals, because it will remove some of the fear and some of the continuous opposition that you're meeting. I would certainly try and get a small team of perhaps 3 real specialists to help each cottage hospital. And if you could get one that actually, instead of just shutting down, had managed to reconstitute itself in a quasi-private sector system. Now, none of the things I have to suggest are very exciting, and none of them are instant solutions.
No, I think that's right, and I'm not sure you can judge this year or next year or last year. I think we're talking about over a 10 or 15-year period. I'm sure that you know...
I don't think time is on your side, Ken. No. I really don't think time is on your side.
I'm not saying it is, but time is on my side to do what?
Time is on your side to re-establish that the manager is actually managing the situation here. Well, and if you are managing it, you're managing it in an extremely Byzantine way.
In what sense?
Well, I don't think, I as a manager would not be particularly pleased if I put forward a plan which had been agreed with everybody, including the Regional Health Authority, to my District Health Authority, and walked out 50 minutes later with a plan written by one of the members on one sheet of paper.
No, come on, let's have this on the table. The policy that I put forward was further steps along the road of our strategy. We achieved one more closure along the way.
So that was your policy, the Dunham policy, the Dunham paper was your policy. I mean, if the Dunham plan was imposed on you, Ken, then you're culpable because you as a general manager lost control. If it's your plan, I have to tell you, the plan doesn't get you to where you say you need to be.
Just a minute. I think a minute ago...
The answer to your question is it did take us one step nearer.
So, as far as you're concerned, as the manager, so in a year's time, you'll be working the waiting list down and you'll be operating within your budget.
There is a good chance of that. There's a good chance of that.
I mean, well, if we don't say, despite your great confidence that you're going to achieve this, and despite my cynicism and my bottle of champagne standing ready to be delivered, you don't succeed in achieving this. What do you think will happen?
I think we'll be back to the sort of package that I put forward to the members of the Health Authority, which was continuing the strategy that we
I believe, I must say, you've been in a lot more trouble than that. I think you just about run out of credibility with the regional authority. I would be quite surprised, Ken, if I was talking to you in another couple of years, unless you start to deliver. I'm pretty depressed after that meeting. I don't think Ken can possibly get the full savings out of the Dunham plan, and I think he's going to find it extraordinarily difficult to get his own strategy through without major changes. So he's got a real uphill struggle ahead of him.
Face up for the goal kick now, come on. Good header. Oh, hard luck. I've decided to leave because I've achieved virtually all the tasks that I set out to do. But I'm a bit sad because of the long time in which I've lived with this particular problem. I feel as though I wish I was in there. We're coming up to another difficult time. I've lived with it for 7 years or more, and I feel sometimes that this is what I was there to do.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Come on, Luke, come on, you're asleep there.
I'm not really surprised that, having seen the sort of frustrations they're up against, Ken and Frank are leaving. Frank's choosing to retire from the Health Authority, and Ken has chosen, for his part, to pursue what I hope will be a very successful career in the private health sector.
That's it. Oh, easy. Well done, Matthew.
I'm absolutely clear at the end of this enterprise, first of all, that I don't want a job as a National Health District Manager. I think it's a very, very difficult job. I'm also clear that some of the very simple management principles would help the execution of that job. I think Shropshire now need to concentrate on policies which will reduce the waiting lists and to find ways in which they can keep the cottage hospitals open through a mixture of private and public sector approach. I think that the white paper, which is now the National Health Bill, will help in a number of ways. First of all, the authority will be much simplified, and certainly from this experience that could only help. I hope the doctors will be more involved in the whole operation. That's one of the aims of the thing. If that happens, that will help. But one thing's for sure, the white paper will only work with really high caliber management, much better costing systems, much more clarity, much more sharpness. That's why Ken's successor is so vitally important. And I hope they get it right, and I hope Shropshire wins.